Since you last saw Feed All Monsters, a bunch of stuff has happened. We set up tilesat animations for the first 3 settings. I also worked on the 6th and final tileset, adding meteors and lava to our boring mountain. We also implemented animations for the last mechanic, the throwing pan. And I also drew a bunch of clouds for all 6 settings, and don't they look amazing now? And we also did contrast adjustments on rocks, the grid, spawners, we added more particles. Anyway, today I wanted to get started on the monster collection. In Feed All Monsters, after you've fed a bunch of monsters of a certain type, you will get a photo of them as a reward. Each setting has a total of 6 monsters and 1 boss monster. So that makes 36 plus 6, 42 illustrations that I need to do. That's a lot. In this video, I want to roughly show how I tackle this kind of work and maybe even share some illustration tips that even those of you who rarely make art can hopefully use for your own workflow. I started out by opening my references and having them in front of me as I sketch. For each of these sketches, I try to keep the following story in mind. These should be photographs that the characters maybe take of the monsters. So therefore they shouldn't look too posed. The Piggeh, for example, I'm drawing slightly clumsy, like it just missed the thrown food and is jumping after it. I don't worry about staying too on model when I sketch, because I can always tweak that in Photoshop afterwards. I'm more concerned about the overall shapes. I generally want to avoid shapes touching each other. Like if I have a circle here and then a square right next to it, like it just doesn't look good. It is much better if the square is in front or behind the circle, overlapping it. No, both shapes kind of have a similar volume, so even better than this would be to have one object be way smaller or one be way bigger than the other object. Since I'm in a sketching mood, I try to knock out the drawings for the first 2 settings on the same day. One more thing I also often use is beans. Let me explain. The butterfly monster, for example, is really just a ball stuck on top of an oval. To show that oval in perspective, I start by making an action line that defines the whole pose. Then I draw a shape that represents that oval. And then I just add a circle for the head and then one more line that represents this stripe. As a general rule, if you are looking down at a round shape, that line will mostly be a U-curve. And if you're looking up at it, it will be the reverse. After I've imported all the files, I start editing the sketches. Once I'm happy with the sketch, I draw over it to create a more detailed line art that Joseph can later use for vectorizing. I mainly try to follow my initial sketch, since that one has all the dynamic movement and expressiveness. For me, it is just easier to capture that on paper and draw by moving like my whole arm than it is in Photoshop, because I'm using the drawing tablet and I'm really only using my wrist to draw. After 40 minutes of cleanup, this is what the first 12 monster sketches looked like.
Alrighty, I'm gonna try and tackle setting 3 and 4 now, and maybe I'll even get the other 2 done. So yeah, let's just start drawing.
The difficulty for day 2 was to not repeat too many poses. Since the slime, for example, appears in all of the 6 settings, it was getting harder and harder to come up with something original for them to do. But I think I pulled it off. I'm especially proud of the last one, which roasts some food over some lava with its spikes. I bring the sketches into Photoshop and repeat the same process as before. And with that, the last 4 pairs of sketches were done as well. Vectorizing time with Joseph. Vectorizing while I bother him. Yeah.
Nice, thank.
So while Joseph was vectorizing my monster sketches, I still had to work on the boss monsters.
Ja, dass man den Boss hat und vielleicht einen der Charakter noch im Hintergrund.
Ja.
Ja.
While I sketch, I of course have the boss in front of me. The slime boss is the best one to start because I've already drawn 6 small slimes and the monster itself is super easy to draw. So I can easily use this one to just test out a bunch of different ideas. The first one that I wanted to see was how it would look if the characters were also part of the illustrations. So I draw them as super simple shapes just to feel out the idea.
Ich könnte mir vorstellen, dass es zu klappert ist.
Soll ich noch ein alternatives machen?
Also die Frage ist doch, worauf soll denn der Fokus liegen?
So I sat down to visualize 2 other ideas.
Okay. Der halt mitten im Feeding-Prozess, so die Charakter noch angedeutet sind, also so vielleicht so verschwommen am Rand des Bildes und das ist halt so...
Also wenn ich das jetzt sehe, B und C, dann würde ich A sofort kicken, kommt nicht mal im Ansatz dran, kann mich nicht entscheiden. Finde alle geil.
After some discussion, option C was our favorite. So we went with the story of the happy boss being surrounded by lots of food for all the other boss monsters as well. Speaking of the other bosses, let's get to drawing those. And with that, all of the bosses were done, except for the last one.
Ich glaube, ich habe eine witzige Idee für den Burb.
Ja, was denn?
Der sitzt ja so in seinem Nest drin, ne?
Ja.
Könnte man, dass er nicht mehr im Nest sitzt, aber hinter ihm im Nest sind 3 kleine Küken.
Ja, das finde ich witzig.
Ich glaube, das ist vielleicht ein schöner Abschluss zum Game.
Ja, finde ich gut.
Then I took photos of all of the sketches and brought them over into Photoshop. And now we kind of have the same process as the normal monsters. I make a clean version of the line work and try to add small details as well as do some small corrections. And of course, while I work, I have the actual sprites and references on the second monitor. This is mainly so I can stay somewhat on model. Looking at the footage now, I think I should have sized up the octopus head, but I will probably do that when I make the final illustrations. For the pumpkin, I was way off on the face, so I corrected it and also added these little ruffles to the leaves. Lastly, the burp, and I think it turned out so cute. While I was drawing this one, Joseph and me were talking about how happy we were that this was the final image that players were gonna see before they see the credits and turn off the game. And yeah, I think it's just so fitting for like the whole vibe that we wanted. I started out by bringing in my in-game sprite and recoloring the shapes I got from Joseph. Next, I recolor the background so I get a better overview of the whole illustration. For the colors, I import the whole tile set so I can grab them directly from there. This would be the slime if I only stuck to our in-game art style, which is fairly flat. I like how it looks, but it lacks that oomph, like it doesn't feel polished. The first thing I add is an overlay layer. This will give the illusion of shading without adding that airbrushed 3D look. I paint the slime in a mid-tone, then add a point light and a bounce light from the floor. Lastly, some blue light from the sky. Then I set that layer to overlay and turn down the opacity. From then on, I really just duplicate the shapes that are already there and scale them to get some small detail. I try to only work with gradients and flat colors to keep the stylized look. For the shine, I use the overlay layer mode again, and with some more tweaks, the slime is finished.
Wie findest du den Slime?
However, I wasn't really happy at this point, as you can see here by this facial expression, and I needed a second opinion. Joseph suggested to turn down the glossiness a bit, and that was a really good call. I also sent the image to my artist friend Selena, who does amazing stylized stuff. She helped me figure out the slime's eyes, and I pretty much just copied her suggestion one-to-one. After fiddling around with the background some more, the slime was finally done.
Hey, it's a few days later and I just started working on the little Piggeh monster and I just laid down the basic colors and like tweaked the composition because I had some rocks in the background that weren't really helping, so now I just like got rid of them. Okay, so my main issue that I need to solve next is how to render the Piggeh, because with the slime it's like super shiny and reflective, and the Piggeh isn't that. So I need to find a way to make it look 3D-ish like the slime, but still keep it in layers, and then for it to not be shiny. I think I might add the little rim light that I have for the slime, the little white one. I'll do the background, then I'll do the Piggeh body, and then I'll just see. So let's go into Photoshop!
The first thing I do to the Piggeh is add a core shadow using a multiply layer. Then I add the same overlay layer that I used for the slime. And now it's time to add the rim light. I duplicate and resize the snout and body shape of the Piggeh and color them in white. This not only pops out the Piggeh from the background, but it also makes it match better with the slime. Selena also gave me the feedback that the snout still looked a bit harsh, so I softened it by using another gradient. I also try and use the same rendering technique on the yellow berry to really see if that workflow would translate to other objects. And with that, the first two monsters are done. Rendering these two gave me a tool set that I can now use for the rest of the illustrations. So let's get to work.
I colored all of the monsters now, and I think I only need to apply shading and lighting to them now. I'm hoping I can get that done within the next 1 to 2 hours. Yeah, so let's see how that goes. I am finally done with the first 6. Yeah, we're gonna make some food now, and then afterwards I'm gonna take a look at them again from just like with some distance and then see if I still like them or if I need to make more tweaks. Joseph is actually gonna recolor all of them, so I already have the base colors, and then I think if I just draw for like 2 to 3 days, yeah, I can get these done. So
now, anyone who's ever done a large amount of graphics in a certain style probably knows that at this point I just had to sit down, turn on some YouTube and repeat the same steps over and over and over until all the illustrations were done. I could have probably broken down the process by doing each step at a time, like adding the overlay to all 6, then adding the core shadow, etc. Instead, I opted to finish one illustration after another, since this would allow me to take breaks and give me a greater feeling of accomplishment. I finished 3 illustrations today, just sounds a lot better than I have finished 6 illustrations. Of course, there were some new challenges, like the ghost who needed some more transparency and layering, or the third setting with its darker backgrounds. But overall, my workflow never really differed too much from the first Piggeh and slime. Also in the video, it looks like I drew all of these in 3 to 4 consecutive days, but that's not really the case. These probably took like 2 weeks with long breaks and other tasks in between. Now, some eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that I'm not drawing the actual food, but just colored blobs. When I started these illustrations, Joseph and I hadn't decided on what kind of food you'd feed all the monsters in Feed All Monsters. Yeah, we should have probably had this discussion a little sooner. Anyway, let's talk about the food now.
Simone, like just draw like generic food shit, like just do that, like why do you have to concept that? I at least wanted to have a little conversation about it just to get Joseph's opinion on this, but for me, if you're feeding monsters, that's kind of similar to feeding pets, but it's also kind of like the monsters are like more than pets, so it's kind of like human food that you're giving them. It should be mostly vegetarian food because like my thought process, like if you throw a monster like a piece of meat, it's like where does the meat come from in a world where there's no cows? So are you feeding monsters to monsters? And I just wanted to stop that train of thought because I know that some people think about things in games like I do, and I just didn't want to have that discussion. So all of the food that we're gonna have should be vegetarian, and then I also wanted to have like mostly finger food. Like I don't want to throw like food that is on skewers or that's in bowls or stuff like that, like no ramen soup, no like shashlik. I don't know the names of most foods that are on skewers in English. Anyway, no cutlery, no bowls, no sticks. We came up with a list of foods that fill those criteria, and I've already gone ahead and done some like really light scribbling just to test if the food would even be recognizable if I just do it like in a super simplified form. So I just showed these to Joseph. He recognized most of them. We cut the onigiri because we have that as a player item in the game, so kind of be weird if you also throw that at the monsters. And then we also scrapped the fried food because the most recognizable type of tempura or like fried food and like the veggie stuff, it just doesn't read well. But everything else, we have like pies, buns, tortillas, wraps, some pizza, burgers. My favorite one is the pierogi, even though like that shape can easily be read as other things. But this one, even though like I know a lot of cultures have the dish where it's just like filling inside of a dough and then made into like this shape. This one's a pierogi because they're delicious and I love them. We have all of the food now, so the plan is that I'm gonna sketch them, Joseph's gonna vectorize them, and then I'm just gonna throw them into the illustrations, and then, yeah, the illustrations are done.
For the food, I use the same workflow as for the monsters. Only difference is I was very hungry during the whole drawing process. Anyone else have that happen when you draw food?
So, Joseph finished making the food vectors yesterday, and I'm super excited about this because that means today I can recolor them, add some, just like some basic shading, some lighting, maybe tweak a couple of the shapes that don't read as well as I thought they were. Yeah, then we can put it in game and then we're done. And into the illustrations, which was the whole point of making this, yeah.
I finished up the food graphics in Photoshop, trying to use the same color palette as I had for the monsters, and I am so happy with how it turned out. Someday when we eventually make stickers for our games, I want to have all of these on one sheet. Anyway, when the food was finished, I opened up the monster graphics and swapped out all the placeholders with the actual food sprites. And I know a lot of people probably won't really care about these portraits, and there are more pressing features that we still need to wrap up. However, for me, this was a task that I could fully complete in one swoop, and one that I would have probably kicked down the road until release and then had to rush. So I am super happy that we finally have this done, and as a little bonus, I can show you our finished collection screen. I still need to rework the background, but I'm super happy with how the whole screen turned out in the end. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully see you in the next devlog.